guys, and welcome to another huge episode of Triggered. Hope everyone had an incredible weekend, and as always, it is great to be with you. Big show for today. We'll show you the lowlights from the left's communist-loving protests over the weekend. It doesn't end. I guess they still think there's kings here. Also, FBI Director Kash Patel is moving to declassify the Swalwell Fang files. You know, that's when Eric Swalwell, then on the House Intelligence Committee, actually was, dating and sleeping with a Chinese spy. Minor details like that, So that's going to be a big one. And coming up, John Solomon will be here with big developments out of the Ukraine and Democrat kickback schemes to the DNC and to the Joe Biden campaign. So we're going to get into all of that in just a moment. So make sure you're liking, sharing, subscribing. Okay, hit the little like button right now. It's so easy. When we finish up here, share with your friends, subscribe so you never miss one of these major episodes. If you do miss the show here on Rumble, go over to Apple, Spotify, and catch it there. If your friends get their podcast that way, send it to them. It's that simple. You guys are the front line of defense for all this stuff. We need you guys to participate. And for all of the top headlines that we cover on the show, go over to my news app, MXM News, like minute by minute, MXM News, where you can get the mainstream news without the mainstream bias. And of course, guys, please don't forget about our brave sponsors for having the guts to support this program. It's a really big deal. Support those who share your values and will put themselves in the crosshairs to make a point. So I think it's a really big deal and something we all have to think about. And guys, we have a brand new sponsor, YRefi, where you can invest in America's future. It's their mission to provide private student loan borrowers a second chance while creating opportunities for eligible accredited investors. And as an accredited investor, when you invest in YVerify, your interest rate is fixed. And you have the freedom to take your monthly interest income or reinvest it, whatever you choose, all while investing in America's future and our next generation. For more information, just call 877-80-INVEST or log investyrefi.com. Just that easy. For complete details, make sure to review the private placement memo and scan this QR code to view the disclosures. YRefi, investing in America's future. Let's get into some of the top headlines. So Saturday was supposed to be, this massive, no kings protest, Here we go again. It didn't work out the first time, so we're going to try again. The left's big moment. Millions of people marching for reasons they can't entirely understand or articulate, other than, I guess, obsessive Trump derangement syndrome, and also because a lot of these people are probably being paid. And like any good left-wing riot, they had to attack a courthouse at some point during the night. In Los Angeles, a group laid siege to the federal courthouse in downtown Los Angeles, where they were smashing concrete blocks and throwing them at federal officers. DHS personnel in riot gear were assaulted, and multiple arrests were made. Check this out. This is the same playbook we saw in 2020, guys. Basically, the same people, probably, just change the t-shirt, change the flag, the slogan, whatever it is. They all look the same. Same tactics, dress it up as, resistance, and then start attacking federal buildings and assaulting law officers. I remember when that was an insurrection, but, if you're a Democrat, it's clearly not. It's just, protest, paid or not. And meanwhile, guys, in New York, the mask came all the way off because we've got video of a communist group marching openly chanting, there is only one solution: communist revolution. Check this one out.
Working class revolution! Working class revolution!
Solution! There is only one solution! Communist revolution!
Communist revolution!
There is only one solution!
There is only one solution! Communist revolution!
Yeah! Communism is gonna win, baby!
After liberation! Down, down for their occupation! Down, down their occupation! Down their occupation! Down, down their occupation! Hands off the Middle East! From the belly of the beast! From the belly of the beast! Hands off the Middle East! Hands off the Venezuela! Hands off Venezuela! Hands off Cuba! Hands off the Middle East! No war, last war! And the Democrats too! Neither party represents you! Neither party represents you!
Neither party Your take on that? How do you feel like?
No war but the class war! 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 From the belly of the beast! Hands off the Middle East! From the belly of the beast! Hands off the Middle East!
So let me get this straight, guys. They call themselves, no kings. They claim they're defending democracy, and their solution is a communist dictatorship. I mean, that's the plan. Doesn't seem like it. I mean, I think a communist dictatorship is sort of like the closest thing to a king we could probably have. No kings, but they'll take a Stalin, maybe a Maduro, a Mao. They'll take a Castro, but definitely not a Trump. I mean, obviously can't have that. And like I've told you, these protests aren't organic. They're highly organized. They're highly manufactured. In fact, an incredible investigative thread dropped this week from Data Republican, exposing a man named Stephen A. Cash, a former CIA officer who worked in the Balkans during the Clinton era, who then served as a senior advisor at DHS Intelligence Analysis under Biden. After my father won in 2016, Steve Cash co-founded something called the Steady State, a group of 340 plus former intelligence community officials. Some of the same people who signed, that fake letter claiming the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. And he's admitted on video to having played a role in planning the No Kings process. Check this out.
March leads me to both the month of March coming up and a march, which is the No Kings March, which will be on March 28th all around the United States, probably going to be the biggest mass march demonstration in American history. We are going to be there. The Steady State, we are partners with many, many organizations that range from one end of the spectrum to another end of the spectrum of political views, of specific views. It's time to get out in the street and demonstrate the resolve of the American people to stay a democracy. I attended a planning meeting actually for the No Kings rally, March 28th. There's my plug again. And I left it practically in tears. Thousands of people are involved in the planning of this.
In case we missed it, his company, Deck Prism LLC, holds over $15 million of Department of Energy contracts, including sole source, meaning, is the only guy that can compete in it, non-competed contracts, while donating 100% to Democrats over 20 years. Again, this is not organic. It's highly organized. And most of these folks are either being paid or they're just useful idiots in the Democratic machine. And speaking of useful idiots for foreign adversaries, Eric Swalwell seems to be hitting new levels of panic over his infamous relationship with Chinese spy Fang Fang. FBI Director Kash Patel is pushing to declassify and release the investigative files on Congressman Eric Swalwell and Christine Fang, better known as Fang Fang, the Chinese spy who infiltrated his office, helped him with fundraising, placed an intern in his congressional offices, and had what the classified intelligence report describes as an intricate and intimate relationship with him, including, and I'm being delicate here, certain sexual acts. FBI agents in California have been directed to gather and redact documents for release to senior administration officials, and the Bureau is even discussing sending agents to China to interview Fang because they believe she has even more damaging information on this clown. And what does Swalwell do? He goes on X and says, Donald Trump is targeting me. He's scared. I mean, think about that. A guy who was on the Intelligence Committee subpoenaed me, went after me, my family, never met a camera he didn't love, got out there talking about all these things and insurrection and Russia collusion. The guy's apparently sleeping with a Chinese spy. Yeah, oh, no, it's Donald Trump targeting him, not like, I don't know, maybe the American people should target a congressman on an intelligence committee who's sleeping with a Chinese spy. Just maybe, Eric, just maybe, you're the bad guy. Eric, buddy, I want you to take a look at a banner that flew over the protest this weekend. My father isn't a king, but he is your daddy. And by the way, Swalwell is currently running for governor of California because he wasn't bad enough in Congress. You get to be governor. I mean, that's what happens. When you're failing in some sort of political position in California, they actually promote you. That seems to be something that happens over and over again. Just look at the current governor. So the voters of the largest state in the union really deserve to know how exactly a Chinese spy can compromise a sitting member of Congress, a sitting member of the House Intelligence Committee. What did she get access to? I think inquiring minds and anyone with a brain would want to know. What did she send back to Beijing? And why was none of this ever prosecuted? Now, speaking of the radical left losing their minds, I need you guys to watch this clip from a woke political conference in Canada. Watch the whole thing. Their convention chair, who identifies as non-binary, of course, literally stopped the entire conference because a young woman called them Madame. They halted proceedings to correct a pronoun. I mean, this is what Canada has to spend their time on, apparently. And it gets better. They have something called equity cards. Equity cards, guys. Literal race and gender cards to determine who gets to speak and in what order. I guess, if you check a couple boxes, you take priority over someone who probably knows maybe more about what they're talking about and isn't batshit crazy. So, if you're a white male delegate, sorry guys, you go to the back of the line. Your voice matters less because of your skin color. It's not a skit. It's not South Park, although it totally could be. It's totally real. Check this out.
Thank you, Delegate. There's a point of privilege on microphone 1, then we'll go to microphone 3. Go ahead, Delegate.
Yes, hello. I was standing here with my gender equity card before you called on the previous speaker. That's my point of privilege that I would like to raise.
I will explain the speaking order, which is fixed, that I cannot amend, which is the pro-con rotation. You can move yourself up a line that you're standing in.
I am pro, and I was...
We went...
You went pro, con,
We went pro-con, pro, and my plan was to go con. The speaker at con mic 3 also has a speaking card.
Yesterday, this card was used in an inappropriate manner, And while I understand in Ontario, we note this as equity, even if this was also used inappropriately in terms of gender. I want everyone to be mindful that these cards for individuals like myself who identify as a Black woman have no value outside of this space.
This is a real political party in Canada. Literal race cards and pronoun policing who are running the political conventions. They even call themselves the New Democratic Party, which, pretty much lines up with our current Democrat Party here in the United States. And while we're at it, across the pond in the United Kingdom, guys, you're allowed to fly the ISIS flag. You can fly the Hamas flag. You can fly the Pride flag. But which flag is not allowed? Well, apparently the British flag. You can't fly the flag of the country. You can fly the ISIS flag, Hamas, Pride, all the other crazy flags of the world, but you can't fly the British flag. Watch this clip from a recent demonstration in the UK.
Whoa. Why would you do that? Because you're being a kid.
And you wonder why countries are falling apart. Why when you can't fly your own nation's flag in your own nation, but a terrorist organization's flag is totally acceptable, it's just fine. That tells you everything you need to know about Western civilization and where it's heading if we don't fight back. Now, here's one more for you. And this is a perfect example of how Democrats operate at every level of government. In Connecticut, Democrats created a meals and beverage tax, an extra 1% tax, and they stood up and swore to the people of Connecticut that the money would go back to cities and towns. However, since 2019, that tax has raised over $500 million, $500 million. How much went back to municipalities? Zero, guys. Not a dime, not a single penny. Every single dollar was diverted into the state general fund. Check this out.
Brand new for you at 5:30. Connecticut's tourism budget has been slashed, but there are plans to revive it. Money will come from a meals tax, a tax that is supposed to help promote the state, but is going somewhere else. Your chief political reporter, Susan Raff, is live in Middletown, where restaurants are fighting to get the money that was promised. Susan?
Sam, I think we can all agree that tourism is important, yet Connecticut spends far less than many other states. Now, this meals tax was supposed to go to help cities and towns, but somehow it ended up going somewhere else, straight to the state budget. Abby McAllister was having lunch this Friday at Tate's in Middletown. She agrees tourism is vital.
If we're going to be successful, we need to promote the state, bring business in.
She may also be one of the few who knows you pay a meal tax when you go out to eat. Every check includes a 1% charge. That extra 1% tax has gone back to the general fund since 2019, generating over $500 million. But that wasn't the original intent. The money was supposed to go to the city or town where the tax was generated. The owner of Tate's came to Hartford to speak at a public hearing on a bill to bring some of that money back.
So the hospitality industry is a cornerstone of whatever culture you might be a part of. And I think that it's important to understand that we can contribute much more to our communities this way than just the meal or the donation.
It's money that is generated inside our local economies, but it's sent straight to the state's general fund. Our towns get nothing, our tourism marketing budget gets nothing, and our small businesses get nothing.
Scott Dolch from the Connecticut Restaurant and Hospitality Association has been leading the fight to get back the money and do what he calls common sense. Give 50% to the towns, the other 50% to the state tourism budget. Democratic and Republican lawmakers agree on this one.
A lot of people think Connecticut tourism really is just Mystic, the casinos, or pizza. There's a lot more going on out there that we're not funding.
Abby McAllister says cities and towns need the money, and the return will be tenfold.
Give us back what was designated for tourism. We're not asking for something that wasn't already designated for tourism. We're just asking them to give back what they've taken.
Now, the Finance Committee will have to give approval in order for this to go to the full General Assembly. So the bottom line is some Republicans and Democrats agree that the money should go to where it was intended, but there are a lot of people who are wondering how it went so far for so long in the wrong direction. Your chief political reporter, Susan Ralph, Channel 3, live in Middletown.
Money stolen from you, consumers, stolen from the restaurants, stolen from the small businesses, stolen from the towns that were promised the money and dumped into the state's general slush fund. This is what Democrats do. They tax you. They promise you'll see the benefit, and then they take the money and spend it on whatever they want to. $500 million, guys, just gone. Nobody held accountable. No one held accountable for the lies since they told you specifically what it was going to be spent for. They promised. And it's just another example of massive Democrat-orchestrated fraud. Joining me now, investigative reporter and Just the News founder, John Solomon. John, great to have you back.
Good to be with you, Don.
So you broke this incredible story about NSA intercepts showing Ukrainian officials basically discussing a plot to funnel back millions in American aid money back to the Biden 2024 campaign through, none other than USAID. I mean, really, I guess it shouldn't surprise us anymore, but it should shock us. Can you walk us through it and, what else we need to know?
Yeah, let's give everybody a little quick history lesson because the context of this is important. Yeah. In 2016, we know that the Ukrainian embassy in the United States was advocating for Hillary Clinton's campaign. The ambassador here even wrote an op-ed doing so. Yeah. In the period before that, they were enriching the Ukrainian gas company, Burisma, was enriching Joe Biden's son, Hunter. So Ukrainians generally have had a leftward lurch in their support in the American political system, sometimes very overtly, like putting Hunter Biden on the board of Burisma, or their ambassador writing an op-ed saying they would prefer Hillary Clinton over Donald Trump in 2016. Then we get through the whole impeachment scandal. We're told, don't believe any of that Ukrainian liberal preference. Turns out it was all true. It wasn't a conspiracy theory. Hunter Biden and the Democratic Party were deeply entangled with the Ukrainian government, the Ukrainian businesses. And we lived through that. Joe Biden's in the White House. And in 2022 and early 23, his fundraising is lagging, even though he's the incumbent. He's got the problems with the Afghanistan withdrawal, questions about his mental acuity, enormous unpopularity, particularly when it comes to an open border. And so it's at that moment when NSA guys with headphones on are listening, and they intercept a series of conversations. Some of these are probably on email. And it's a senior government official in the Ukrainian government of President Zelensky talking about a plot that has been discussed with USAID workers, our foreign aid agency workers in Kiev, to give a $200-300 million clean energy grant to Ukraine. Now, Ukraine's in the middle of a war with Russia. The last thing they're going to be building is some clean energy project. They're trying to
They're not building solar panels when you're getting bombed every day. It's probably not great use of a panel.
A complete ruse. And they even say so. Listen, the Intercept suggests that this is not going to be a justified project, but you'll spend the money, and then by the time they discover it, it won't be recoverable. And the goal is take that money, then you're going to give it to non-governmental organizations, nonprofits, then they're going to hire subcontractors with the USAID money, and then those subcontractors are going to hire American companies, and those American companies are then going to move the money into the coffers of Joe Biden's 2024 campaign and the Democratic National Committee. And they said they hope to arrange this in such a way that 90% of the money that originally came from you and I, taxpayers, through USAID to Ukraine would ultimately be laundered into the DNC and Joe Biden to help his 2024 campaign. That's what's been captured. Now, that was only recently discovered. That intercept or series of intercepts were not ever brought to the attention of anyone at the FBI or anyone during the Biden years. Tulsi Gabbard just recently found it. She's asked USAID to go look and see if they can find the contract. Did it happen? Was there some fraud involved? And so there's a beginning of an investigation to find out whether what was discussed ultimately transpired, and we should know answers in a couple of weeks.
I mean, do we trust USAID to do that? I mean, that's like asking OJ to find the murderer, right? I mean, it's like, it feels a little, again, I know they've cleaned out a lot of that stuff, but, I imagine, once you get past that top level, these are all people that were likely in on it, and they're not going to probably incriminate themselves or, great point. I can't imagine them looking too hard to find the culprits here. Yeah,
well, the good news is that the Trump administration has gone right to the top. Russ Vought, the OMB director, very trusted by the president, has been asked to look at this himself. Don't rely downward. Now, what's interesting, OMB gathered, when it took over USAID, all records, so they couldn't be destroyed, so they couldn't be tampered with. Mm-hmm. So they have a preserved database of every email going back 2 decades that USAID workers ever did. Now, they're scouring through that now. I know they found some interesting emails in the last few days, I'm told, that may be referring to this plot. But it's at the very senior levels of government, not down at the deep state bureaucrats who would have a great motive in trying to hide this.
Yeah, so does this fall into the bucket of fraud that J.D. Vance would be looking into as well, or is that because it's international?
Very well could be. You could have 3 things, right? You could have USAID confirm the allegation. Then 2 things would happen. You would send it over to J.D. Vance's task force to recover the money from those who stole it, and then you'd send it over to Kash Patel and Pam Bondi and launch a prosecution like we did in Minnesota after we discovered some of the 2024. In 2024, we discovered some of that Minnesota fraud, and then the U.S. attorney under the Trump administration got rolling, and now we got 90, 100 people indicted, 60 already convicted. So I think there would be a 2-tier process. 1, recover the money. That's J.D. Vance and his job to get the money back, punish the workers, stop it. But you could also have very significant criminal prosecutions as well.
Yeah, so I guess the mechanism here really just fake infrastructure projects designed to be essentially disapproved after the money was already spent. So they say, hey, we want it for this, we want it for that. It's never going to happen. We know that. Give us the money anyway. And then when it doesn't get approved, all of a sudden you have this money to be able to play with. 90% going to the DNC. I presume the 10% is kicked back to Zelensky and his cronies, over there. Not that they need the 10%. They've probably been stealing so much from, the trillions we've probably spent over there. Maybe they don't even need the 10%, but I imagine, some of it was there. But I mean,
sure,
this is sophisticated stuff.
It is.
Who on the American side, was coordinating that? Do we know that yet? I mean, how deep does this go? Because I can't imagine, this isn't one guy with an email. I mean, this has got to be a team of people. This is a, multi-$100 million transaction through complicated processes, and again, how do we trace that money?
Yeah, so what we do know is that the NSA identified the senior Ukrainian government officials who were having this conversation. And I believe they have some of their emails in. So we know who in Ukraine was involved. The intercepts don't mention the USAID workers by name. They just simply mention that they're working for USAID in Kiev. That's a small group of people. And that's why the calling of the USAID email should help people find that pretty quickly. Who was in touch with those government officials? Who was talking about a clean energy grant in the middle of a war with Russia? It should be easy to narrow down. And my understanding is they've made some progress just in the time since I broke the story last week. That's a good sign. You're right, it's very sophisticated. In fact, the NSA intercept report, which is a summary of the intercepts, said that this was designed to be so complicated it would be hard to figure out after the fact. Laundering it multiple times until you eventually break off the money and you send it to the DNC and Joe Biden. So it is, at the time this was going on, a very famous person was running USAID. The former UN ambassador was now at USAID, Samantha Power, someone very close to Obama, someone very close to Hillary Clinton, someone very close to Joe Biden. So at the top of USAID is a very political Biden, Clinton era, Obama era person. That doesn't mean she's involved yet, but certainly you'd be looking at that agency from the top down to see who knew what when.
Yeah, I mean, as I sort of just mentioned, we've been covering the fraud everywhere. Minnesota, California, rampant, and I'm sure they'll get into a lot of that. But, now Ukraine. I mean, J.D. Vance has a fraud task force. Kash Patel is turbocharging the fraud probes. We have a new joint task force with the FBI and HSI in the One Big Beautiful bill. How can we, bring all of this together to deliver, actual indictments and recover funds? Because, we see this stuff all the time. It's almost a never-ending amount of fraud and almost a never-ending amount of, culprits. I know I do, and I'm sure all the people watching, they want to see indictments. Now, they got to understand there is a process, maybe explain that a little bit, because if you break the process, you break that sort of, chain a little bit, it's a lot worse, because not only will nothing happen, they'll weasel out of it and probably continue this stuff. But can you talk a little bit about that? Because, again, I think people do want action. It seems the Democrats get action without following the rules. We won't get that. It'll get venue shopped to a judge who would throw it out in 2 seconds. So we have to play by a different fact set, unfortunately. But how does all that work right now?
Well, I think one of the things that you're seeing is a little bit of innovation by the Trump Justice Department in where they pick venues. So, if you go to D.C. and New York, you're not going to get a conviction. Traditionally, that's where most big government fraud cases have gone. However, if a single subcontractor is in another state, or if a single contractor or NGO is in another state, you're seeing this Trump Justice Department move cases to those states. That's how the grand conspiracy case is now down in Miami. Last week, you saw Bill Pulte, the Federal Housing Finance Administration Director and the head of Fannie Mac and Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. He referred Letitia James a second time. She gets cleared in Northern Virginia the first time. He sends a second referral this time. He sends it to Florida and to Chicago, because that's where the mortgage insurance companies or the house insurance companies were based. That's an innovative way of potentially tackling this and getting around some of the jury nullification issues that we've seen in D.C. and New York. There is a brand new Assistant Attorney General just for fraud. So there's a whole new division of the Justice Department dedicated to fraud. New resources, new mindset, new top-down management. This case, if it were to be proven, if you could find the grant and the money moving, would be tailor-made for that division. And then you'd bring it in the venue where the best, or the jurisdiction where the best opportunity is for conviction based on the evidence. And so those are things that they're looking at right now. There are 2 American companies that were mentioned as the ultimate destination where the money would go before it was disseminated. Those were redacted from the report because obviously you want to preserve the lead gen for the Justice Department and the FBI. But the intercepts clearly named the American companies that they thought ultimately would be disseminating the money to the DNC and to Joe Biden. So there's a lot of information in the raw NSA reports, and it seems to me that the Trump administration has hit the ground running now. And so I think J.D. Vance will be involved in recovering the money. The fraud team, the FBI, Kash Patel, is out there every day arresting bad guys, and pretty soon I wouldn't be surprised if Kash Patel is putting handcuffs or certainly booking John Brennan based on what we're hearing down in Florida. There are some people that went and got phone records of Susie Wiles. They could be arrested soon. So you're beginning to see machinery, which was very slow at the beginning because you had to get this evidence put together, now starting to get into targeted prosecutions, targeted arrests. And I think a lot of that's going to happen in the April-May timeframe. I think we'll see a bunch of significant arrests and indictments in the next 2 months.
You've mentioned Brennan. Are there others? Obviously he was a big one. I think he was one of the guys that lied before Congress and perjured himself. Yeah. And, not only does he not get punished for that, he gets, a job being a commentator talking about ethics on CNN. I mean, it's sort of, ironic, but it is typical in terms of, Democrat projection. Accuse others of doing what you're doing yourself. They seem to do that a lot. Are there other big names that the people watching this show would know that perhaps weren't covered under the sort of, Joe Biden last-minute blanket pardon for anyone who was doing his bidding?
Well, Comey got a subpoena just a couple of weeks ago. So the former FBI director, James Comey, got a subpoena. That is a sign that some of his work is an object or a concern of the grand jury down in Florida. So we're keeping an eye on that. I actually think if the grand jury decides that they're going to indict Brennan, and there was a very big action last week, the Senate and House transmitted official copies of the testimonies. You wouldn't need that unless you were about to indict someone. You could use the unofficial copies to introduce the grand jury. But if you ask for the official, it means your grand jury's thinking about doing something. I think after that, they're going to go down to people who may not be that famous, but who were the operators inside the FBI, creating and opening files. I mean, the other day I reported your dad was subjected to 4 consecutive code-named FBI investigations. From the summer of 16 to January 25, he was under continuous investigation by the FBI, treating a man who was twice elected by the American people president as though he were a security threat, a counterintelligence threat. Who opened those cases? What agents created the predicate? I think there's a lot of activity right now looking at whether agents open cases against your dad and against his followers and his friends and his assistants on false pretenses. And so they may not be sexy names, but they were people who were at the heart of weaponization. I think that'll be the next round of indictments after a decision's made on John Brennan.
Yeah, because I imagine, you really have to get that going now because, if the Democrats win midterms, we're starting, Russia to the 12th, here we go
All
again.
over again.
We get it. It's hard to believe, but you almost have to be playing the same battle because we have not historically been playing the same battle. And so there's nothing to dissuade them from just continuing with the nonsense.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Listen, they've already made clear they intend to be nonsensical. They're going to double down. They want to indict everybody again. They're talking about it every day, deplatforming them, ruining their businesses, suing them. That's what the Democrats have in store. And you're seeing just in the last few days a great example of that. So I have requested under the Freedom of Information Act some of the information about China's penetrations into our election system. One of those involves a Chinese operator named Christine Fang, who was deeply involved with Eric Swalwell. As my request is working its way through for potential release, the New York Times and the Washington Post, the 2 official news organizations of the deep state, are out there saying, oh, wouldn't it be terrible if information about Eric Swalwell came out? No, it actually would be good for the American public to know what China did with people like Swalwell, like Kathy Hochul, like Dianne Feinstein, where we now know Chinese assets were inserted into the democratic machinery. But you're seeing the deep state already turning to all their friends, trying to create a sympathetic view about the release of what is official government information. It's crazy.
Just so we're clear with Swalwell, because I remember because he was in the room when, the House Intelligence Committee subpoenaed me and I'm giving testimony, for treason, crime punishable by death. They're trying to throw me in jail for the rest of my life.
That's right.
I mean, he's sitting on the House Intelligence Committee while having an affair with a Chinese spy. And and I'm the bad guy somehow. It's
crazy, isn't it?
It's sort of shocking, but that they can get away with it for that long.
Yeah, no, they're very good because they've got the legacy media in their back pocket. Now, the difference between 16 and 26 is that we have a much more robust media system that can get the story out and around and counter false stories much quicker than we could in, let's say, 19 when they made up the bogus Ukraine impeachment arguments, or certainly 16 where they made the man just elected president look like he was a Russian stooge when there wasn't an iota of evidence that was true. I mean, we now know from John Durham.
And they knew it.
Yeah. They knew it from the beginning. They made it. They created it. They faked it. They knew it was fake because they faked it. It's just that amazing. So the good news is the amplification system, the countering system, the fact-based system, way more robust than it was. Now, getting people indicted is important because in these sort of conspiracy cases, you roll up, right?
Yeah.
So you're going to look for someone who wants to make a deal, who's about to get indicted and say, I know something about X or Y. And so the mob and drug cartel notion of rolling up has to start now if we're going to get accountability before the 26 or 28 election.
John, it seems like a lot of your reporting from years ago is now perhaps more relevant than ever before. Back when we were first learning about the inner workings, and corruption in Ukraine, et cetera. Do you think there would be folks willing to talk and cooperate with an investigation now that may have not been able to or willing to then because at least now, they understand, where things are. They understand how bad it was. And, maybe they don't have the teeth that they had when the Democrats were in power and they controlled everything. And, if you did that, that was the end of your job, your family, your life. They'd throw you in jail for being a whistleblower, and looking into the fraud far more likely than they would actually go after the fraudsters. Because, we're talking, seismic levels of waste, fraud, corruption, and abuse at this point.
Yeah, you know what? It is very true. Since your dad got back into office, whistleblowers who were kept silent or just chose to keep silent for career preservation are coming out of the woodwork. Kash Patel has developed a whole group of them in the FBI. Some of them, the whistleblowers, are now leading the cases that they were blowing the whistle on, which is a really cool dynamic. They get to investigate what they knew was wrong all along. You see in Minnesota, all the state workers who've come forward saying, hey, Keith Ellison and Governor Walz, they knew and they turned a blind eye. They've come forward in a big way. In the intelligence community, the recent work I've done not only on Ukraine, but on China and the fact that China hacked into our voter registration data in 2020, and it wasn't told to the American people. We didn't know about it. There's a whistleblower there that's helping Tulsi Gabbard and John Ratcliffe. And so there are some really courageous patriots who either were silenced or kept silent for preservation's sake, are now assisting these government investigations, and that's why they're speeding up in speed. It was a slow crawl at the beginning. Now it's an avalanche of evidence coming out daily.
You know, what about the same from the Ukraine side? Are there people over there that are willing to jump in and step up and say, hey, yeah, this is nonsense and this is what's going on? I mean, what's the state of play in Kiev? Again, I think most Americans are fed up. I wonder if some of those people are willing to cooperate now.
My reporting indicates that Steve Witkoff, who's done a great job negotiating all across the world, including in Ukraine, recently was given some information from some Ukrainian government officials that could be very, very helpful to the last decade of understanding some of the corruption going on and the relationships between our two countries and some of the people who profited or created fraud or did other things, tried to create political influence through untoward means. So we understand that at least some information has been transmitted to people like Steve Witkoff. Those are really important people at that level. If they get the information, they know where to give it and how to get action. So a lot is going on. You see it in the Russia collusion case recently, some interviews of people that were long silent. All of a sudden, they're having their story told to the FBI, and then grand jury subpoenas follow. So I think the entire system, the entire democratic system, is vibrating. The system depended on three things: untoward money, illegal immigration, and hijacking the apportionment system. And then if you can get to that, then maybe registering non-citizens or other people, ballot box stuffing. People say, there's no proof of ballot box stuffing. To the contrary, we had a race in in Connecticut and one in New Jersey just in the last 2 years that had to be completely done over because Democrats stuffed the ballot box. We have new evidence that China was considering doing that, maybe in concert with some Democrats in 2020, stuff that Kash Patel put out. Those three pinnacles of election interference: corrupt money, illegal immigration, and sort of hijacking the apportionment system, and then ballot box stuffing. All three of those now are a high priority for this White House, for the intelligence community, the FBI, to get all the evidence out and to start indicting people. And, we've had a few non-citizens suddenly indicted. We were told non-citizens voting was a conspiracy theory. Not anymore. I could show you a whole bunch of cases. Recently, the Assistant Attorney General for Civil Rights, Harmeet Dillon, who oversees voting rights, has said that her early review of voter rolls has found tens of thousands of non-citizens who got into a position to vote, not hundreds, tens of thousands. That is a wake-up call, and I think this administration, between now and November, will make significant improvements to the system by cracking down and punishing those who abused it in the past.
John, you mentioned Brennan, but what else should we be keeping our eyes on, in this coming spring and summer? Are there sort of, you mentioned the fraud in Connecticut elections. That's probably new for a lot of people. They don't even realize it. Again, we have other ways of getting the news, but I think the average American is still probably heavily reliant on mainstream media. The people who aren't junkies, who aren't going to go beyond, sort of the title of the essay. Oh wow, this must be accurate. It must be there, or it's just guilt by omission. They're just not going to include those kinds of stories. What are the other big ones we should be looking out for in spring and summer?
I suspect that the intelligence community has now identified which states had their election registration voter databases hacked by China in 2020. Now, 2 years ago, when Great Britain learned this happened, it was a national crisis. Months of scandal. People got fired. Major security reforms for the election. I think when states start to get notified, we didn't tell you this, but 6 years ago, 5 years ago, your voter registration database was accessed by China. That's going to create a really significant aha moment in America that election integrity isn't some conservative talking point or some imaginary conspiracy theory.
Yeah.
It is very real. Our enemies are looking to hijack the ballot box, perhaps in concert with Democrats. And I think those notifications will be very, very powerful moments that even the mainstream media won't be able to ignore. Hey, if you're in a state and you find out your voter registration data is now in the hands of China, that's a big story no matter what the political aisle is. So I'd be watching for that in the next few weeks. Then I think Brennan, a decision to be made on Brennan, then some FBI people who were involved in spying on the enemy. I mean, at the end of the day, what those 4 codename investigations were against your dad, which was Crossfire Hurricane, Round River, Plasmic Echo, and Arctic Frost, it was an effort to use the tools of the intelligence and law enforcement community to spy on your dad's campaign and the people supporting your dad's campaign for 10 consecutive years, from the summer of 2016 to January 2025, just before he raised his hand and took the oath of office. We need the American people to understand how pervasive that spying is, how much worse it was in Watergate, as some of our senators were saying last week, and get that out to the people with evidence that says, oh, I believe this. This isn't a tweet or a truth or someone's grievance. My God, we really did this. And I think those things are coming down the pike between now and June.
What do you think's required, John? Obviously, hey, we don't believe those things would happen under, our FBI now, but what's to prevent it from just, hey, Democrats win midterms, obviously they have power in Congress, perhaps they win an election in 28 or 32.
Yeah.
What's to prevent this from ever happening again? Is there any real way to codify that now so that it can't happen again? How do you see that playing out? Because I think, that's a big deal. Dealing with the past and, having accountability, I think is huge, but really preventing it from happening in the future is probably, a far bigger deal to the American people. It took what we've gone through over the last, decade to make the people aware that, what they believed about America is probably not actually accurate in terms of, what they thought was going to happen under the, quote, justice system, et cetera.
Right.
How do you stop it from ever happening again?
Well, I want to go to something Ronald Reagan and his team was fond of saying. At the end of the day, people are policy. And what the Obama administration did 14, 15 years ago was start embedding their people into positions where they could create abusive decisions, abusive tactics, abusive targeting. The first thing that has to happen, and it's happening in some places, other places not as much, is a replacement of the people and a replacement of the culture. You have to have people in the FBI that says, I'm going to resist the temptation to spy on the Democratic opposition or the Republican opposition because it's just wrong. We put a whole bunch of people in the Obama years who thought that was actually the prize of being in their position, not the bane of what they shouldn't be doing. So changing people out is important. That process is underway. At the FBI, it's extensive replacement. In the Justice Department, it's pretty extensive, though maybe not enough yet. In the intelligence community, I'm a little worried that we still have a lot of deep staters still in the same positions able to do that. Then you have to create penalty. Someone has to realize I'm going to jail for 10 or 20 years if I do this in the future because Joe Smo just went to jail for 10 or 20 years. That's a very big important. And then the third is, I think the reason there's a temporary renewal of the FISA standards is to watch some of these reforms that were put into place last year by your dad, see how they're working and make another set of reforms before your dad leaves office so that FISA search warrants and other things that were abused in this process have a better system to catch cheating before it's approved. Once a judge approves it, that baby has left the train has left the depot and the abuse is done. Can you catch it in real time as someone's making an abusive request? And there's some very smart things that are being done now that weren't done a year ago because of reforms that your dad and the intelligence community made, John Ratcliffe and others. One of them is, one of the ways that the FBI used to bamboozle judges is they would get one FISA warrant from one judge and maybe it didn't go well, so they wouldn't go back to that judge. They would go to another judge who knew nothing about the first FISA warrant, get them to approve the second one. Now the FISA warrants all have to go back to the same judge. So if a judge approved it, like, I thought you told me you were going to get this, why didn't that happen? Now you've got somebody who's looking at the whole body saying, I'm not approving this because you didn't deliver what you want. Those are some of the reforms underway.
Well, that's a really big deal. John, thank you so much. John Solomon, everyone, check out him, check out Just the News. Appreciate you being here as always, man.
Good to be with you, Don. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Thanks so much. Thank you for tuning in. Remember to like, to share, to subscribe. Hit that little like button right now. Share this with all of your friends so they can see it. Get the message out. If you don't, follow us here all the time on Rumble, check us out on Apple and Spotify. If your friends get their podcast that way, make sure they know about it. So share the links there. Sign up anyway, even if you're here watching it all the time. That's how we get the word out. Check out our incredible sponsors down below and in the video description, okay? They have the guts to support this kind of programming. Support those who share your values, okay? Download the Rumble app on your smart screen TV so you can watch the whole family. I may have dropped one little curse word, but not bad. So I was pretty well behaved today. Generally try to keep it in there so all the kids can watch. But, it's you guys that get it out there. So make sure we are making sure we can beat the nonsense and the narrative from the mainstream media and where so many others are actually getting their news. So, guys, remember, stay strong, stay informed, stay engaged, and always stay a little bit triggered. I'll talk to you all again very soon. Have an awesome week.